All right, so I started calculating out my Terran fleet, and I wanted to create a fighter-heavy fleet. So I created four CVs to begin with, but then calculated everything else out from that. Well, I could have actually reduced the number of transport, but CVs are very, very expensive because they come with the capacity to carry 4 fighters each, plus the bases carry 4 fighters each as well. So when I calculated it all out, I was basically a CV over, so I reduced it by one CV, not CVE, and it's fighter complement, and I still ended up a few points over. So I reduced down to 23 fighters total. So I've got one less fighter. That's kind of okay because my bases aren't going to be in the front line anyway. So I actually don't have to base up. I don't have to fighter up the bases. I kind of wanted to, but whatever. I'm expecting to take high fighter attrition though. That's my general understanding of what happens. At least from other space games, notably SFB, where there are a lot of fighters, but also from Traveler Space Combat. Fighters tend to be really expendable. Now, they're expensive here. They're 44 points. That's the same, basically as, well, as a scout, I guess. You don't expect that to do much. I mean, it's somewhere between the scout and the destroyer. It's not a big ship, but the big bonus of it is it's immune to those heavy weapons. I wanted to get some transports so that I have the capacity to invade a planet. I probably overspent on those with the 4 that I bought. Yeah, I can put them in my reserve though, because they're not going to be necessary on the first turn. There are no planets in that first situation. I don't know what the hell the maw is. It's that big green thing with, I think, I am assuming that's a black hole in the middle of it. It could be a wormhole, but there are no rules for wormholes in this. It would be kind of cool if there were. I'm already kind of regretting not just playing Space Empires to be the campaign module for this. But, I feel like, I don't know. I'd be spending so much time doing the development of technologies and stuff like that. Because, honestly, in Space Empires, you don't start with a big fleet. You start with very, very little, and you build your way up towards something larger as you're exploring. And, what's not covered in here and what's kind of painful, if we look at, I don't know if it's actually specified in here, but, well, Titans aren't in here. But what's not noted in here is all sort of the weird things that are not, not covered in Talon, stuff like the Doomsday devices and stuff like that, which have an effect if you run into them, but they could actually show up in your combat situation. And without rules for those kind of things, I just feel like there's even more rules that aren't listed here that I'd have to get rid of. And I'm not sure why, like, Exploration 2 isn't in here. I don't remember. Or Terraforming 2. I don't know why those wouldn't have to be in here. I understand mines couldn't be in there. Research and Industrial, you probably, you would be getting too much research there. Boarding and Security, I don't know if that has to go, but there's no real boarding combat rules for this game. Point Defense, I don't know what replicators do. The unique ships would presumably have weaponry and capabilities that just aren't represented here. Same with flagships. Although flagships, they allow you to command a larger fleet. So, like, there's some things that I'm not sure how well they'd mesh with the SE4X. So I kind of want to play this campaign. This will give me a good feel for the combat system for this. I may not make it entirely through. I have the feeling, like the SFB Grand Campaign, this could take quite a while to play out, and I may not have the willpower for it. But anyway, I've come up with my Terran fleet, perhaps flawed, and I got like 17 points left over. I'm going to figure out how to record and handle things in a while, but I feel like I got some progress already. The default thought with the Terrans, which is, fighters seem like they're probably good bang for their buck, is my guess. Therefore, I want carriers, la la la, and I went for that. For the Talon, it's a little harder. I didn't have some kind of default theory like that to go with. So I actually looked at the ships. Clever of me, huh? Looking at their different ships, the battle cruiser has a bunch of missiles. Now, I don't like missiles. I don't know why. And I'm really not sure in this game because, I'm thinking kind of SFB terms always. Well, missile type things are really good in SFB, the drones, in terms of the damage output for the energy that they cost. But these guys do actually take energy to fire. However, I look at the BC and it's got like 3 missiles it can launch off of a 2-turn firing cycle. Now, that's a firing cycle I can't speed up, but that's kind of appealing to me. And then the other weaponry, I have a couple of banks of these disruptors, which aren't great, but, what I'm looking at is these are good anti-fighter ships. So they appealed to me a lot. So I bought heavy on those. Now, I could only buy 5 of any given ship, and it did the same with the destroyers, which also have a preponderance of missiles. I'm just thinking, I like missiles, just like I thought I liked fighters on the other side. Probably for no good reason. I did buy 4 transports. In this case, I hadn't yet picked where the Terrans were going to build their bases, and I've set that up already. So they're putting one up here on Rigel, one's on their home planet, and the other one is down on Cloud 9 here. And these are fixed, so I can just place these and not worry about them. And that kind of worked with their plan to have 4 transports, because they're saying, okay, look, I'm not going to be able to defend Orion very well, which means if I lose that or push here, either one's good, right? Like if I put a heavy fleet here and push there, something nice happens in terms of me gaining ground towards the Talon homeworld, but I have to take Hoth then, and in order to advance past Hoth, I'm going to need a big force of transports. Okay? Presumably at least 2, but the additional ones can cancel out defensive transports, so that, I'm almost certain the opponent's going to have some transports. Well, I ended up, and I did this with die rolls, ended up coming up with a similar strategy for the Talon themselves, which is their bases. They have to take one on their home world. They took one on Hoth because that's just too risky. I'm kind of like, and the other one is here in the Forbidden Zone. So actually we're facing off each other with our bases there, which is kind of interesting. Rather than the planetary, rather than putting the bases around the planets. Now, I'm hoping that terrain, I didn't look up the terrain rules, but I'm hoping that bad terrain can't happen around your base. That like, as long as you actually have a base there, it becomes a choke point and no longer generates terrain, because otherwise like a black hole could happen and it could suck your base in, and that would be terrible. And I'll probably have to make a quick house rule to avoid that from possibly happening. And then, let's see. So, by going with the asymmetrical, not placing on the planets, especially leaving the planet open, I also had the same kind of plan of, well, let's make sure that we have our 4 transports to defend the planet that we're not defending. But in our case, it's going to be this one, and we're going to have to plan for that. Now, I'm going to put some counters down, some tokens or something, to represent the bases, because those don't move. But other things, I have to divide up the fleets accordingly. And there's all kind of rules as to how you can disposition your fleets in this. Unlike if I was playing the SE4X, where I'd have the whole map to kind of play with, and I'd be doing exploration and building up my supply lines and all kind of crap like that as well. So the problem is, I believe the SE4X doesn't really handle everything that I'd kind of want the game to handle. So like if I'm playing with, I would have to play with the transporting convoys in that. That doesn't generate a convoy scenario or anything like that if they're present. And to me, that's just kind of like, geez, I would expect that kind of shit to be showing up in here, where there'd be a potential to capture the shipping capabilities and everything. But again, this game does not link that intrinsically into the SE4X, and that's one of the reasons that I'm not doing the SE4X, even though it kind of links in. It doesn't handle all of the factors in quite the same way that like FedInEmp does for SFB. Granted, my FedInEmp probably doesn't handle them as well. Like there's aspects of SFB type rules, just like there's scenarios here for convoy rating. There's aspects of that that aren't covered in my old copy of FedInEmp, but I think the newer editions of it actually have that kind of stuff. So that's kind of appealing to me. And well, now I'll divide up my fleets. I guess that's my next step. You'll have to excuse me in terms of like, I've been playing a decent amount recently and doing the vids as well with the Blue Max stuff and everything. I'm a little slowed down now. I had to cut some wood today. I gotta get some things done, and if I don't do them, you know, all I'm doing is playing games in order to avoid doing other things. Although maybe I'm cutting wood in order to avoid doing other things like playing games, I'm not sure. It's always that kind of stuff with me. Turns out I cheated. You actually can't set the base up in a place that has a randomized terrain, which means we have a few different options. Let me take a look at what I chose here. For the Terrans, I'm going to have to move their base not on Cloud 9. It's going to go to elsewhere instead, because I have a base on Rigel, so I don't really need it there. I like the idea of the base in the planet, although maybe it makes some sense to have the base forward of the planet because of the loss of the planet. Or if the front line's in the planet, the cost is more extreme. However, this is, since I do have a base here, I don't want to have a base in both, so that's just what I decided there. But for the Talon, I have a more interesting choice because I stripped my base off of here, so I can put it in either of those two as far as I'm concerned. And I'm just going to odd even that. And we'll put it over in Omicron 8, which is actually similar to the last setup where we had the bases facing each other here, which I liked the idea of, because that shortens, you know, that takes a defensive bonus away from these, takes a defensive bonus away from the planets. But by putting them here, I tighten this up, make it much less likely that we get the expansion out to there. Of course, this is more valuable, whatever. All right, let me put some counters down for the bases, and then I'll start figuring out the shipping, which, you know, is based on what the TL levels. Let's see. It's based on LP numbers and a proportion of how much we can put per, and part of the fleet has to be in the reserve to begin with anyway. Now, taking the fleets that I designed here, I had to move them into the reserve. 500 points of ships have to go into the reserve. In the case of the Terrans, that's their 4 transports and 11 of their fighters. Actually, I only needed 9 of the fighters, but the other 2 fighters didn't matter. And by putting them in the reserve, It gives me more flexibility with this. This is a strategic problem. Ideally, neither side should have too many ships that they can't use. Now, it's no biggie that I built the 4 transports, but the fact that I've got 2 extra fighters and extra 88 points that I could not use, that's problematic, honestly. That means I've got basically 1 less ship for the Terrans. And that meant their LP, when I counted up what they had, came to 29 that they had to associate. So then I look up here, 29 says I have to put a minimum of 5 in each of the 4 spaces. So I apportioned that. Antares, I put a battlecruiser and a light cruiser. That adds up to 5. That's a weak sector. The Badlands, a heavy cruiser, a destroyer, and a scout. Again, adds up to 5. In Maelstrom, I put a battleship and a carrier with 4 fighters. A carrier with 4 fighters is worth 5. A battleship is worth 4. So I'm putting 9 of my points into this one. That's going to be something I hope to win. And then in Orion, I put 2 carriers. That's 10 more points. So I'm looking at trying to win these 2 sectors and maybe giving up ground in the other 2. But, you know, it might be possible to fight a battle and not lose in a big way. And we'll see what kind of forces, how the forces align in terms of deciding that. For the Talon, I had to put the transports into the reserve. No biggie there. Again, these are things I'm going to want, so I might as well spend the points on them now. But I put 2 of my battleships into reserve. The battleships are my biggest ships. Well, no, they're my 2nd biggest ships. The dreadnoughts, I think, are larger. But, you know, I'm not absolutely convinced that these super heavy ships are all that advantageous. They'll be good for cracking bases, I think. But the problem with them is they're vulnerable to fighters. And I don't know whether or not the Terrans are going to be using fighters. But fighters are kind of the Terran's big advantage, I guess. That and the wave motion gun. You know, the heavy ships have a special weapon, right? So that's what I put there. And then into the sectors, well, I had 35 points remaining. If I look here, I have to put a minimum of 6 into each space. So in Antares, I put 2 battle cruisers. That's my 6 right there, with another 3 points in it. Because I don't have a base there, I'm hoping to push there. And we're kind of seeing, you know, gee, some sort of mirroring in terms of, yeah, one side made sure they had a base here. Well, that makes this a more palatable area to lose. Just like falling back on defenses in any game, you know, having that good base there means that if I'm overwhelmed, I can just fall back and say, screw it. For a couple of rounds at least. In the Badlands, a battle cruiser, that's 3, a heavy cruiser, that brings me to 6, and then 2 more points in a destroyer and a CA. I like the destroyers, and the reason I picked them is the missiles. That's, again, you know, a little heavier than I had to. The Maelstrom, a dreadnought, that's 4, a battle cruiser, that brings me to 7, 8, 9 in the Maelstrom. This is going to be a big fight because both sides are contesting there, and they have to. You know, it's only a 3-sector thing, no base in play, no base possible because of the die rolls. And an Orion, a battle cruiser, a heavy cruiser, that gives me my 6, and 7, 8, a destroyer and a frigate. I kind of went with a more balanced approach overall. And that might work well for me because I have more ships total. So, what's the next thing? On the first turn, we go to the initial battles as if it's a battle phase, 31.6. Now, I remember there being some sort of initiative here. What order do you fight the battles? The player with the most LPs decides which battle, no, that's the front line. starting in Antares and moving their way down. So we're ready to go. Now, I am going to load this up. I know it's not very long, but this is the setup for the campaign, and I've just done it, you know, and I think I'm going to be going into some detail in the battles. It might, you know, the first battle might take more than one round. So the next scenario will be, you know, for what is this? Farpoint Station. Excellent. Okay. Okay, let's enter. After what's a nuke with the mock song coming into my head. So just based on it's called Number One, and it's about Commander Riker from Next Generation. The fact that he put on weight and like grew a beard, and the argument for that, the reason for that in the song, it's a parody song. Almost all other songs are, is in one way or another, is there are no bathrooms on the Enterprise, so he couldn't shave and he couldn't take a shit. All right. But anyway, there's a line there about going to Farpoint Station. How long it's going to take them to get there before he can use the bathroom. All right, let's send this up.